I am putting off a dreaded task.
What's that?
My Lightroom is a mess.
Oh.
Would you like to know what version my Lightroom is? It is Adobe Lightroom Catalog 3-12 ASDJKL. Just
That is, I hate when they occasionally hit version upgrades that they have to rebuild catalogs, I guess. So you get the, like, whatever your name is, -2, and nobody's in the habit or gets a lot of joy out of the idea of deleting a Lightroom catalog. So most people just let it sit there, and you end up with all these like duplicate things, and it's just a mess. I'm really sorry. That's really stressful work. And, you know, it took me longer than I care to admit before I had a really nicely organized, logical Lightroom system. And everything orbits around dated folders and then file names that are essentially just the timestamp of when the photo was taken: year, month, date, hour, minute, second. I'm grateful I committed to that after about 3 years. I'm surprised it took me that long. But I used to think, oh, of course, I'm going to import and name the folder that my images are sitting in, like my client's names or the event name or whatever it is. It's like, actually put all of that stuff in the keyword metadata, because that's very searchable, keeps the organization of your catalog very tidy and consistent.
I am putting off a second pressing task.
You like my mug?
Adding keywords to any of my photos.
Well, you know, we might come full circle there with all the handy, and I noticed Glass just yesterday being very good at this. The AI searching capabilities might get so good that people that never, you know, had discipline behind keywording things, it wouldn't surprise me at all if at some point the AI search feature, if Adobe desperately needs to implement into Lightroom Classic, it's there in Lightroom.
Wait,
like Lightroom Mobile. But the AI search, what?
Why is it only in the one that no one uses? Is there, if you use the new Lightroom that syncs across your phone and your desktop, please send me a message. I would love to meet you.
As your main editing.
Because
platform.
I have never met anyone that does it.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing for.
It's the interface, you know, functionality wise, functionally, it's the exact same thing. But yeah, the interface is clearly a huge step backward. I will say it's a good iPhone app. Like,
well, you know what they say.
In there is impressive.
I would love to have my iPhone be able to be my main photo editing tool.
You know, it's funny. A lot of people, of course, nobody says that about their phone, but a lot of people, myself included, really wanted the iPad to be able to do Lightroom editing. And I, over the years, kind of realized that, why am I desperate to be able to edit my photos on an iPad? It's an awful, slow experience. I know a lot of photographers that do it, but if you're doing high volume stuff, you need a keyboard. And if you're just going to sit there with your iPad and a keyboard anyway, it should be on a Mac, because it's so much better, which segues nicely into what I was going to start this discussion about, because I just printed a bunch of stuff. One of the very first realizations I had about why I love Mac so much was the Apple P command to print. That didn't exist on Windows, at least not at the time. I'm not sure what the shortcut is, but I remember as like an 8-year-old in computer class, we had our little Mac LE2s or whatever. And that realization of like, of course it should be a shortcut that's super intuitive, Apple P, it prints, was something that always stuck with me as a differentiator early on, as to like how Apple thought about things compared to everyone else, apparently.
Yeah, take that, Microsoft. You didn't implement something back in 1995, and now we're never touching you.
Pretty much. I never used any of those like 80s Apple computers, but it wouldn't shock me at all if that was the very first shortcut that they created for printing. That Apple key was pretty useful, not gonna lie. Kind of sad actually that they got rid of it. Now it's just, when did they do that? Now it's just command?
Yeah.
And why is the option key that weird like hieroglyphic? I don't even know what that is.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Just don't be free of concerns.
Yeah, don't overthink.
Never.
Just like with the touch bar.
Never think. Don't bring up the touch bar. We've moved on. We're past it.
Okay.
Wait, what were you printing? Were you printing photos or just like
tax stuff?
Taxes?
Yeah.
That's way less fun.
Yeah, it was just regular laser printer. So that was my morning. Not too exciting. Sorry, what was your second thing? Did I interrupt you or did you tell me?
Oh, no, keywords, man. I haven't keyworded anything. But now that I'm like embracing time as a part of my photography, as a creative tool, which is, you know, taking a minute to get there. I had this moment when I was at a photo book store in Seattle a couple weeks ago. And my favorite photo book in the world is Stephen Shore's Common Places, Common something. That guy. What are you?
You have his book in the background.
Uncommon Places. Yeah, it's just a really exceptional Americana photo book of, you know, road trips back and forth across America in the early to mid 70s, and then it culminates sometime in the early 80s. But so it's like I think it's one of the best American photo books ever made. It's really gorgeous. It's currently on sale at aperture.org in part of their summer sale, where you can get $100 with 2 other books. How do I know that? Because I almost bought it.
Aperture.org. Is it a...
It's a wonderful photography magazine and photo book store and print store for photographers. Awesome. They have a really exceptional selection of photo books. So I was in, you know, like this has been one of my favorite photo books for years. I saw it the first time when I was like 20, 21, when I was like looking through photo books in Portland at Powell's way back in the days, little youth, as a little baby youth.
I remember that bookstore. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, it's always stuck with me. And then I could finally, you know, just afford to spend $80 or whatever it was on a photo book. And hooray, now I've owned it for years. I love it. I look at it all the time. It is a large influence in my work. I had literally no idea that this man had a different style of work. He has like an entire photo book that I found at this bookstore in Seattle a couple weeks ago that really wrecked my brain of aerial photos, where he's just like taking photos either from high up in a building of like, you know, streets looking interesting, or from actual planes or helicopters. And I had no idea, because that is not in the style of his other work, right? His work in Uncommon Places is very street specific and gorgeous. And the fact that he had a whole other compilation of an entirely different style of photography that was still large enough and good enough to make a book out of, kind of, I don't know, like kind of like broke my brain a little, because it feels so not unnatural, but kind of unnatural, right? Like right now, if you take photos on the internet and you're posting photos on the internet, you're only doing the one type of photos traditionally, right? Like here are my street photography, not... It's
frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. The pivot of posting something on the internet to and suddenly it be something, say you build an audience like I have or whatever, with the wedding focus or couples focus. Virtually every time I post anything else, even if it's, I think, pretty good or something I'm excited about, it's like half or less my normal engagement rate. It's like, what's going on there? That's so annoying. You just,
like your weird ephemeral portraits of trees that you take with like the rolling shutters, and I don't know what you're doing with those.
It's a rolling shutter and a tilt shift and an ND filter combined with the Hasselblad 907X 50C. Yeah, it's quite the rig, and it takes a lot of work. I can't wait to get back into it this fall after this next wave of weddings, and hopefully Insight will be mostly built out by then.
Okay.
And my new website.
Let's take a road trip to a tree. I don't know. I drove to Pittsburgh yesterday in embrace of time as a photography constraint or a photography tool, because, you know, so this guy has like aerial photos from, you know, across years to build a portfolio and a collection large enough that it can then be published as a book and, you know, refine the skill. And so I have finally, over, you know, our last couple of conversations and the last few times I've gone out to take photos, I have accepted right now. I don't know how long this acceptance is going to last,
Okay.
but I have
You write this down.
accepted
Okay.
that making good photography projects takes time.
Yeah.
Like a lot of time, like years.
It
And
wouldn't surprise me that most artistic endeavors in general can take so much time because, I would imagine rarely, at least for me, rarely do you have the full sense of what you might have like a nugget of an idea of what you think it's going to be and how the project is, but it can take years for it to start to crystallize in your mind and realize like, oh, this is what this project's about, or this is the theme, or this is, whatever that ties it all together, which is frustrating. Because I think a lot of artists, when they present the work, whatever it is, it seems like that it was a fully formed thing from the beginning. Like they could write it down in detail on paper, and then they just went out and shot it. I wouldn't be shocked if that's almost never the case. Not saying it's impossible that people don't do it, but I bet you most of the time it's an evolution like that, and it takes a long time of just evolving your work in whatever way it is needed to achieve that sort of realization, I think.
So I'm embracing it. I'm trying to anyway. Slow and steady, which is why I've felt the urge to, okay, now's the time to bite the bullet and to create a Lightroom
"bite the
organization.
bullet" came from? I'm wondering now.
Who
says that anymore?
We're a photography podcast, not an etymology of words podcast.
Organize your Lightroom catalog. Yes.
Organize keywords.
Yeah.
Projects.
It's in case people don't know, and in fact, I know many don't, because I get this question a lot at my workshops and through Patreon. You can, depending on how disorganized you are, and for whatever reason, there's been an overall consensus that a lot of people seem to agree on, which I don't know when and how this happened. Maybe just a lot of educators thought it was the way to do it, and so it's just kind of stuck. A lot of people create a new Lightroom project with every single session or shoot or different thing they do. Don't do that. That's silly. It's really hasn't been necessary for performance or anything like that in a long, long time. And you are up against a mountain of hurt if you ever want to take a dive into your archives and tease out things. And you don't even know ahead of time when and why that might be the case. So a great example of this is two examples. One is using Imagen for the AI editing, where you kind of build a profile where it's learned your style. You need to send it thousands of pictures to do that, about 3,000 now. But the more you have, the better. And for me, all I had to do was open up my master catalog and select from the past 6 years of work all in one place, all of my favorite raw files from a variety of, whatever it was, shooting locations and styles and everything else, like silhouettes and everything, and export them in one go to send up to Imagen. So it was a really pretty trivial, easy task for me to do. To have to go through like 6, 5, whatever, how many plus years of work and do that to individual catalogs all over the place would take forever. But it's not like I knew Imagen was going to exist and have this feature ahead of time. It's just you want to trend toward a singular source of everything, in my opinion. That is a recipe for disaster if you don't also have a good backup plan, because you get one catalog accidentally deleted and you're screwed. You get one catalog accidentally corrupted, you're screwed. So you got to really make sure you're confident and knowledgeable of that. The second one is just a simple end of year review, right? That's one of my major marketing tools, is having my 150 favorite photos from pretty much every wedding and every session that I shot that year. That's a wonderful way to market. And it takes me maybe 20 minutes to put that together because I can look at my entire catalog. So that's like two major reasons. There's probably many more that I can't even think of off the top of my head, but here's the feature that a lot of people don't realize. If you have already scattered a bunch of different catalogs all over the place from whatever, if it's years of shooting or you created a new one every single event, you can import and export catalogs from one another. So what I would do is start over by making one master catalog and then go to File, import from another catalog, and start working your way through all your disconnected catalogs wherever they're saved, and get them all in one master catalog that you can then organize with some consistency. But a lot of people don't realize you can import and export your actual catalogs from one another, not just the image files.
I had like really fun little little jokes to make through that. And then by the end of it, you were like talking about the specifics of how to do the thing that I'm dreading and putting off. And then I just like slipped into existential dread of organizing, 50,000
Yeah, somebody should
photos.
offer that as a service. I'll organize your Lightroom catalog for
I will
$200.
trade you an organized Lightroom catalog and a camera for Insight copy.
Okay, we'll talk.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
We'll see.
You can
Go ahead.
it's like how a few weeks ago I was hanging out with you and our dear friend Ryan Muirhead FaceTimed because you needed to take control of his computer to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
You could be the Geek Squad for photographers, Sam.
And I have been. This is not an uncommon situation when I've done mentoring. People are just like, help me with the performance. A lot of times it's more performance related. And it is frustrating that out of the box, Lightroom is not set up to perform like super optimally. At least I don't think. I guess I have always kind of carried my settings over year, so I'm not exactly sure how it comes out of the box, but I'm pretty sure it's not ideal.
Well, we can find out when you are organizing.
Yeah.
Be like, whoa, this is a terrible setting.
Speaking of organizing, I pulled the trigger about 30 minutes ago on one of my favorite tasks, and that is hiring a local junk
Where's that
person to come. Yeah, I know. Pull the trigger. Hiring a local junk company to come take a ton of my junk and donate it / recycle it / trash it. I have boxes on boxes on boxes that, because I'm always randomly out of town or forget to put the recycling out, I just have so many boxes.
It is a literal mountain. You
Yeah,
you walk into Sam's house, and to the left is a beautiful little entryway into the kitchen and living room, and to the right is cardboard mountain that you must scale to reach an office room.
Yes. I'm very excited. It's like a nice, and I've got a bunch of other things that I can't throw away that I need to be taken out by a junk company. I'm excited to do that.
A lot of batteries. You're getting rid of a lot of batteries.
Some batteries, yeah, and that's in there. A lot of pool floats and things that are like broken and deflated and just random stuff. Nothing of great value. It's just been sitting around and overdue. I like to do like 2 junk purges a year, like that. Yeah. Once I get my Cybertruck, I can just go to the junk place myself.
Stop it. Stop it. I don't know if this has come out on the podcast or if this has just been my private hazing, but Sam pre-ordered a Cybertruck 9 years ago, and in 12 years will one day eventually get the boxy falling apart
We'll
truck.
see. I think it'll be here sooner than people think at this point.
I'm trying. I am just so we're clear on where I stand, trying to get Sam to order literally any other electric vehicle at any other time. And
yeah,
it
you know,
is
the
failing.
Rivian looks compelling. I went into the showroom in New York, and they're cool trucks, but they're a little too trucky. You know what I mean? It's like too much like a truck.
Okay, but one is a literal tank that you won't be able to park anywhere in the city
true.
that you live, and one is a truck.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I have looked at the hybrid Jeeps. Those are cool. I used to have an old Jeep Wrangler, 2 different ones. I love them so much. If they made a fully electric Jeep, I'd be on board.
Do they
only
not?
have the hybrid. They have this EV Jeep, but it's a hybrid. Essentially, I think it gets 80 miles of range, so it's not.
Yeah, you can drive to my
awful.
house and back.
Yeah, 80 miles. That's like my mom also has. I love this car. It's awesome. A Mini Cooper that's 100% EV, but it only gets about 100 miles of range, I think. So yeah, that's just 2. If anybody out there is considering EVs, get something that has at least 220 miles of range. That was my very first, and that was right over the hump of like the average driving distance of where I would go, and when I would need, even on a road trip, access to charging in a reasonable distance where it wasn't too often. 220 miles was the sweet spot, and anything above that obviously is just wonderful and convenient. But yeah, a lot of people.
Speaking of road tripping, I drove to Pittsburgh yesterday.
You mentioned that. Just yesterday?
Just yesterday, and then back to Pittsburgh and back. For anyone who is not familiar with the East Coast, Pennsylvania, it's long. So I drove from one end, which is where Maryland is, because we're right under Pennsylvania, all the way across to the other end. It's like 200 miles in kilometers. That's 350, give or take, 360. I don't actually know if my brain did that right. That's just what was immediately there.
Sounds impressive that you could do that off the top. I guess you lived in Amsterdam for a bit.
I did. There was that time I lived in Europe and had to use the kilometers, but I prefer kilometers, so I just like stuck with it and then forgot the translation back. Anyway, it's far, so I drove there and back. It was like 10 hours in the car yesterday to then sit and to just basically do a lot of sitting at a baseball game, because I was like, I've been trying to figure out some version of a photo project that I've been searching for this photo project idea that like kind of connects with my family past and history and like, just family stuff without it being about family. And the only thing that I cared about when I visited my grandparents as a child growing up was listening to the Cubs on WGN or on, whatever it is, 680 The Score. AM with Pat Hughes and originally Ron Santos, now Ron Coomer, kept the Rons. It's just like it was a wonderful family thing. And it was like the only thing I had in common with my grandparents was we both liked baseball. And that has passed on to my parents. My parents love baseball. Now I love baseball. It was like a conscious decision to love baseball. The Cubs won the World Series in 2016, and I started caring about the Cubs again in 2015. I was just like, they're getting good again. I'm going to care. My best friend at the time was a baseball fan, so I just like made a conscious decision, like I'm going to care about baseball now. And then I did. It's been wonderful. And so I'm like, doing every stadium. There are 30 stadiums. By the time this project is done, there might be 32 because they might add 2 new teams to baseball.
That's exciting. Did they almost sell off the Orioles, by the way? I can't quite recall.
Oh my God, John Angelos. We're going to get hyper specific. Baltimore sports podcast now. John Angelos,
which I know
son of the multi-millionaire, billionaire family that originally purchased the Orioles, who was a wonderful man. His son took over and is just the worst. Oh my God, he's the worst. He's currently trying to hold the city hostage for an extra $200 to $400 million in development funds. He's already got $600 million, and he's threatening to leave the city.
Okay.
He's just the worst. I can get like deep into it. He's bad. But the last few earlier this year, I've gone to a couple Orioles games. I visited Philadelphia with my parents on a nice little trip to go to a Cubs game in Philadelphia. And both times I took my camera and had a really nice time taking like photos of baseball. And so then I was like, I'm gonna go. Now when I was like thinking of like, okay, what's a project I know will take me many years to finish? So I like don't get overexcited, don't try and get burnout on it. Just like slowly but surely, methodically work through a project just to see what happens. And the idea I came up with was photographing every baseball stadium. So I started.
What is the furthest away stadium you're going to have to deal with?
For me, right now, it would have been Seattle. But I did that when I was visiting my brother a couple weeks ago for the Glass meetups. So the next furthest away would be San Francisco, and there are 2 in LA and 1 in San Diego, so all the California ones.
Yeah, I've been to the Angels Stadium. It's really nice. It's cool.
Yeah, and like Dodger Stadium is a beautiful, wonderful, magical place. Petco is bananas. That's a stadium in San Diego. And then the Giants Stadium is exceptional. Depending on where they are, the Oakland A's may be the Las Vegas A's, so I might have to go to Las Vegas instead of Oakland because they're moving. Because their owner is also bad. This is I'm pro sports.
Do you think
negative sports owners?
The owners, I don't think that's an uncommon thing. Do you think that people, as they get older, become more and more interested in sports?
I don't know.
Or less and less. So this actually reminds me of, I was reading, some discussion about music the other day, and there was a lot of people that like, I used to listen to, punk bands back when I was growing up, and then it kind of transitioned to more relaxed like emo, and now it's like I'm just right in that country jazz phase, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, it makes sense that your styles of music would change over time. Although I think a lot of people kind of stop evolving their musical taste and just listen to the same dozen artists that they listened to up until they were in their 20s for the rest of their lives. But there does seem to be a clear trend toward, if you do evolve in any direction to other newer artists, it tends to be more relaxed as you get older. I think most people, I don't think in their 40s and 50s get into metal like at that age. Maybe, but I doubt it. So I just wonder if that also translates into sports. Obviously, it translates into politics and news, where people become more interested the older they get. But it also ties into the question of photography style. Do you think people, obviously everyone's style evolves, but do you think over time and age, you tend to become more of a traditional preference type of photographer? Or do you think people kind of stay the same? You know, a lot of questions in there for you. Sorry, but we can start with the sports thing.
Stuff. I think it's kind of, they're all kind of linked, right? The older I get, the more I understand what I like and why I like something, right? So like and like I have the agency and the choice to choose to do what I want and watch what I want, right? Like growing up, my dad loves football. So as a football household, I watched so much football. We grew up just outside of Boise, Idaho. The Boise State Broncos were really popular and well-known college football team at the time of my youth. And so like went to a lot of games. And then there was also like, my dad was a huge Green Bay Packers fan. So I pretended to be a fan of their biggest rivals and like the team my dad hated the most. And it was like a fun family dynamic. LOL. But man, I don't care about football at all. Like
okay. Well, you mentioned, the first thing that popped into my head about why people's tastes and styles and trends and things evolve is probably the family unit type of thing. When you have kids, or you're the kid in a family, your parents, I wouldn't shock me at all if somebody who previously had no interest in sports became interested because their kids started playing, sports of some kind. It's always surprised me that soccer hasn't been more popular, because basically every kid in America at some point has to play soccer until they're like 10 years old, and then
it's because they don't play it until they're good.
Yeah, I guess.
They stop playing it once it requires skill, but that when it gets skillful is when football gets interesting, right? See, I lived in Europe, so I can call it football appropriately.
Oh, that's what you're referring.
I'm a big
discussion in another episode of the original source of that game was called soccer in the UK, and then the UK flipped to football.
Man, we are doing a lot of etymology today.
We are.
So yeah, so like I like stuff over time. I like seeing how stuff changes, evolves over time, and like little minute details, which means baseball's for me, man. Like baseball has stats for everything, and like there are little adjustments that you're doing on like where you're holding the ball. We're talking like millimeter changes on.
It does seem that baseball is the sport for people, if there is any overlap in whatever Venn diagram you want to draw between tech kind of oriented minded people and any sport. It does seem to be baseball first. It's the stats part of it, it seems.
There's stats, there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of fun. I don't know. I love baseball. I'm gonna get you into baseball. I'm gonna take you to an Orioles game. We're gonna have a great time.
I've been to an Orioles game. I really enjoy the actual games. You know what I went to in person, I didn't think I would enjoy at all, because I've never enjoyed watching it. But
cricket
in person, I went to a soccer game in Atlanta, and it was so fun. I don't even remember. I just remember it was so fun, and I was very surprised because the score was like 1-2 or something. It wasn't a lot of goals, but it was just the best time.
There's a lot of sport playing in to get to those 1 or 2 goals.
There is
a lot of setups.
There's also a wonderful stadium in a great area. Atlanta's had a insanely fast development curve, and one area of town that put a bunch of money into is wherever that stadium is. I want to say it's like northeast. I don't know. Somebody knows that's listening right now. But so it's the stats thing.
Right, so there's like stats, but it's also just like storylines throughout the year, right? So like it allows you to track the things you care about, because baseball's such a long season. It's 162 games and then the playoffs. So there's enough change and room for growth so that like someone that was terrible at the beginning of the year can finish the year as like the league MVP or can, you know, like turn it around. And so there's just like, there's a lot of fun stuff in there. And there's a lot of, you know, like how like the weather in April in Chicago is cold and miserable, which means that the baseball is like way harder to hit. So then there's all these like little things that there's just variance.
Yeah.
It's super fun. And so, you know, like I just chose to be like, oh no, I was into this as a child, but even though I didn't like care about football anymore, and I chose not to care about football because I was like, oh, I don't actually like that a team playing a game can like affect my weekend to the point that my mood is gone for like 48 hours. Right. I remember the Boise State Broncos. I was like 19 or 20, and the Boise State Broncos lost a single game in like a 3-year span. But them losing that single game like ruined my mood for like a week. And then I was like, well, I'm done. That's
a fair. That happened to my college roommate. He was very, and I think most people in Philly or that have a connection to Philadelphia are quite passionate about their sports teams.
That tracks.
Totally fine. He was very superstitious about everything. He always had to have like the right jersey, and if they lost, he would say, like, don't be around me if they lose. And I'm like, why are you letting this thing that you have no control over control so much of your mood and
because
attitude?
It's amazing when it works.
It is cool. I can see the appeal when you're winning and the excitement and all that. I think the thing that I've never found particularly interesting with sports is that my existence in the world has absolutely nothing to do with anything that they do. None. I just watch what happens, and that can be fun and relaxing, but there's nothing that I do in the world that's going to make any difference about the outcome of what this thing is. So it's just not that interesting to me.
Okay, but that's the same with any movie or show you're watching, any podcast you're listening, anything you're consuming for entertainment.
Exactly.
You cannot control.
The consumption that I've always tried to have a really tight sense of, am I consuming more than I'm putting out in the world? And I've always tried to be more on the output side than the consuming side. And same with like video games, which at least there's some mental calculus occurring in your head to like problem solve, which could be kind of cool. Maybe even when you're playing sports games, like there is like a component of having to think about what you're doing, which is appealing. But even that I'm very resistant to, because it just feels like, okay, all of this effort that you're putting into this thing doesn't leave that screen. It doesn't leave that box, unless you build up a community of people that you play with over the internet, which I've never really done beyond Doom and one friend of mine. But anyway, it's, you're right. And so there's just not a lot of room in my life for things where it's more the consumption side of what's happening. But, even with a film though, or a TV show, the experience of watching it can change your perspective on things in a way that I think can be powerful and meaningful. I don't know that happens much when your team wins a football game. What changes in your life? Like maybe it's more just the community building,
and all your friends have a wonderful time, and you get to party.
So it's just a nice bonding experience.
Community slaps, man. It's good. I
agree.
It's good stuff.
I'm with you.
And
that's why
sports.
I like conferences and workshops. It's that community thing.
Yeah.
And Glass. We've already talked about that at length. The community building aspect of Glass and how special it is because there is no algorithm.
Man, it's so hard. It's like so much work to do the thing, to build. It's nice.
It takes time. But have you ever felt in yourself or seen maybe somebody that's older than you, or maybe a photographer whose work you're so obsessed with, you've been able to track their evolution over many years? Do you think a lot of photographers tend to evolve in a stylistic way? And if so, is there a direction that tends to go?
Do you think, because like my own evolutions are like, I'm getting better at taking the photos I want to take, right? Like earlier this week, I had a wonderful moment. I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, where I got back from, a shoot, a little photo walk. I called it a shoot so you would understand what I was talking about. That was for you.
Thank you. Yes. By the way, I do wonder how many lists a lot of photographers are on when it relates to certain keywords that go to describing what we do.
Yeah.
It's like, yep, I'm going to go shoot the bride.
We've accidentally
shoot
had
the groomsman
a lot of
over a text message more than a few times. It's like
little chit chats today.
Yes, we
pull the trigger, bite the bullet, shoot the shoots. Sorry. It's it's awful. I
Gun
hate
culture
it so
here.
much.
It's permeates.
So I, you know, like I went out and I like felt like I had a really good time. You know, like I was like, oh, this is really nice. You know, I know some of these turned out. There was, you know, I haven't uploaded them in Glass yet. I'm sure I will sometime this week, at least a handful of them. There's like a really nice old Lincoln Town Car from like 1997 or 8 or something,
cool.
with 9 different little trees, air fresheners hanging from the mirror. And I was like, ooh, yeah. Right. Like, so I knew that one turned out. Hooray. But then I got home and there were like 3 or 4 other ones that like kind of knocked my socks off. Right. Like in a, oh, holy shit, I got the thing I was looking for, to the extent that it felt better than, right, like better than other work that I've made, but also now makes me, I like these so much from a technical perspective, not from like an emotional standpoint, not like, oh, I was feeling really good while making it. Like one of them was a throwaway shot that I took down an alley of a trash can, right? Like we're just like, oh, look, a little alley, click. Okay, great. Like felt nothing during the creation, was just a, oh, that light looks interesting. I'll take a photo just to make sure, whatever. And like one of the best street photos I feel like I've taken recently, ever, maybe. And so like it's just a photo of a trash can, I know that, but it's also like, holy shit,
that's awesome. Yeah, so that's you the payoff of you building your intuitive sense of what's interesting without even like knowing it actively. That's a really good sign. That happens all the time when I'm doing portraits of people. It's like, yeah, I'm just kind of going through, it looks nice, the light is great, I guess, and you see it on your screen later, hopefully, and you're just like, oh man, I really do know good light.
Or your your iPad, you know, or your iPhone, wherever you're editing.
Sure.
You don't want to, you know, we were rude to the iPad editors earlier.
Sorry, guys.
It's use a computer, guys. It's so much better. So like I got really excited about that, but it also made me feel like, oh, the other photos I've taken, like some of these are not actually as good as I thought they were, right? Like all those other photos over the last couple of months, right? And like I'm trying not to apply value judgments on past work, while also still recognizing that I was trying to take a type of photo and I got 80 or 90 or 95 or 99% of the way there. And that's really great. While also realizing that once you hit that 100, ooh, hot damn, it feels different. Right. And like looking at it feels different. And like, I'm going to post this photo to Glass and people are going to be like, that's a trash can. Great job. Right. Like,
yeah, that does happen, sadly, that your personal favorites as a photographer tend to not translate to anybody else's.
Right. And so,
and
like,
then the ones you're just like, oh, I must didn't even post that. Everyone's like, what is happening?
Yeah, I have no idea. Like, I run into that all the time with my self-portrait project, right? Like, I have no idea which the ones people are going to like and which ones people are going to be like, oh, yeah, good job. You took a photo this week. You did the thing you said you were going to do. Or like, oh, my God, I love this. I'm seeing so much and you're, oh, what a expressive photo. I'm like, oh, I took that in 3 minutes at 11:52.
You know, I think a lot of what plays into that is the viewing experience, the difference between when you're making a photo and when you see it on a larger screen is big. It's a huge difference, and it's always been really frustrating to me early on, at least, but still even today, where, you know, you have your viewfinder, you think you've done what you need to make a compelling photo, then you pull it up on Lightroom on your giant screen, 30-inch monitor or whatever, and it's immediately obvious to you, not just from a technical, like, oh, it's not as in focus as I thought or something like that, but like compositionally, it's so much more obvious where the problems are. It's like, why couldn't I see that in the moment and adjust for it? It's the same image. It's just the viewing size makes a huge difference. And it's interesting to think about if you had, I guess the closest thing to shooting with the larger experience in real time, like almost like what you'd see on screen, is tethered shooting. And I do think that is why a lot of commercial people do tethered shooting with a client right over their shoulders, because it's immediately obvious what needs to be adjusted for, and there's not as much back and forth and guesswork involved. But it is odd to me that as a photographer, you can't be looking at something on a tinier screen and realize in the moment as easily exactly what needs to be fixed. That is one huge shift and benefit to having, I think, the slightly larger, 4-inch or whatever size screens on mirrorless cameras now, is that you do get a little bit more of that similar experience to looking at a computer screen. But it's just not practical to if anybody's ever used an iPad to take a photo, it's not a great experience to have this giant screen be tethered directly to your camera, right? It's just awkward.
New
and clunky,
idea.
but
Just strap the iPad to your assistant's back, put it in a little backpack, and then tether shoot to it, and just hop on over. Just a little iPad
I do think videographers have an advantage in the fact that they typically do strap a larger viewing screen to their cameras.
And they get those 7-inch screens on top, those monitors. Woo.
Yeah. That observing them work at weddings was one of the big reasons I started to try and push DSLR cameras as far as which one could be usable in live view. They're really nobody as a still photographer was really using live view much at all in the DSLR world, but it was the Nikon D4, I think, or maybe the D4S that really became usable. I still had to manual focus everything, but having that video, I was always jealous of videographers being able to look at the bokeh in real time as they were doing all of their shots. I was like, man, that would be so nice. But they would manual focus, so they were able to do that more easily than with still photos, for sure. Anyway, one big thing related to viewing experience that I think really helps photographers see the evolution and maybe a consistent theme in their work or problem points in their work is to order literal prints of your photos, whatever, but all about the same size, 4x6s. Put them out all on the floor or table in front of you and start to arrange them in a way that maybe there's a certain trend toward color or composition, but it doesn't really matter. You don't have to think about exactly how you're going to arrange them. Just throw them out on the table and see them all side by side each other. It's going to reveal a lot about, again, more on the theme side, I think, of, I was really into shapes this year, or I've really moved from really expressive photos to more serious ones. Kind of amazing to do that. And it's something that you kind of have a similar experience when you look at your glass feed on an iPad or your Instagram feed. You see your grid of stuff, but it's not the same. That's very small. To see and be able to manipulate with your own physical hands 100 prints laying out in front of you is immersive in a way that you can't get through a digital experience, and almost 100%. Nobody actually takes the time to do anymore. So if you've never done that and you have a little bit of downtime, if not this fall, then that's a great winter project. It's just, let's order them. So I have done something similar, not physical 4x6 individual prints, but up until COVID, basically, I would put together an album, a really expensive 50-page, 100-spread album of my work. And then it's so fun and incredible to see everything in print. You learn a lot.
I want to see them. Next time I come over, show them to
Sure.
me.
Yeah.
I think part of the changes that happens is I start, you start knowing what photos you want to take, as opposed to when you're in the experimentation and growth phase, you're like, I'm trying everything, right? Some stuff changes with age. My big thing when I was living in Portland, aside from, my regular street photography and portraiture stuff, was landscapes. I loved hard landscapes. One of the things that I understood at the time was I'm not going to take a better photo than most people in a landscape, right? If we all go to the Maryland coast or something and pull up and park and take some photos of the coast, chances are a professional landscape photographer is going to take significantly better photo than me.
Yeah.
What I could do was I had the drive and the energy and the ability and the working body to hike 12 miles to take a photo of a waterfall, right? I could, I can't take a better photo than you, but I can force myself to go to a better photo than others, right? I can hike 23 miles into the Mount Rainier, up a mountain to take a photo of a lake that only 100 people have been to this year, that sort of thing. I can't do that anymore, right? My body does not work in that same way. And so, that part of my photography is now gone. So now I have to learn how to take a better photo of a waterfall that's available via a road, as opposed to a 20-mile hike. So, that shifted how I take photos and what I'm doing. I don't know. Do you ever worry about getting stuck in your style, right? Because like, do not take this the wrong way. I'm in no way implying that you are currently stuck in your creative process. You've got a look, and you've got your tool set that allows you to recreate that look on demand, and people pay you to make that look of them, right? So like you're like set up in a way as a, you know, as a commercial wedding photographer that takes portraits of people all the time, right? Like the stuff that you're photographing is pretty narrow in the grand scheme of available subjects, right? Do you worry, like, I know that you do a lot of effort to like experiment and play while also still taking the like go-to photos, but what's that look like in like 5 years, right? You know, because like what your photography looked like 5 years ago was like that same sort of thing I was talking about earlier of like the 80% or like the 90%, right? Like you were clearly going for something and you were getting there, but you weren't all the way there yet. And then a few, you know, like recently as you've continued to mature in your craft, it feels like you're actively taking the photos that you want to be taking a lot of the time, right? Like all the way there, here's my photo. How do you, what's that friction like?
I've never felt the fear in a way that it was super concerning, but I definitely felt that a certain set of maybe poses or a certain look in terms of framing that I go for, you know, shooting through a leaf or something, like a certain routine of my process I've always been afraid of falling into. Yeah, in a way that kind of I'm now just like shooting in a circle. That has been a big fear. But that's also why I'm really hyped up and excited about this Insight tool, which I don't think you meant to set me up for that, but it is very much an awkward but new creative input, and awkward in a way that it's like I have to now think about and account for this new thing that I haven't used before. Whether or not it's genuinely helping with the style and output of my work, it's a really tough thing to measure. I just made a video yesterday explaining how tough that can be to know. But for me, in my mental state, I'm much more excited and energized because I have this new thing that I haven't had before. Just like when you get like a new camera body or a new lens or a new tool, like a prism or something that you're kind of figuring out. That's really exciting. So even if it doesn't make a huge difference, it still energizes me in a way that other tools do. And that seeking things like that out, if not because somebody else has figured it out ahead of you and you just haven't tried it yet, or because you can come up with it on your own, is something that you should hopefully always be driven and compelled to do eventually. But that's where I'm like, I wonder if past a certain age, people stop being interested in that and don't care. Like, yeah, I've shot through glass objects. I've used a prism for years, blah, blah, blah. I'm over it. And so they just kind of get into like, you don't need that to make a good photo. You can just use what's in front of you. And if people over time trend more and more toward that mindset, I wonder. But for me, I've always had at least one or two new things, it seems like every year or so, that I can get excited about. Strangely, and I don't think you meant to, but Insight has kind of broken me out of that routine a bit. And it does take some practice to get used to that and comfortable and remember. It's so funny to me how often people say, yeah, I've seen everything you've had to ever say about prisming, and I bought one. I always forget to use it. Like, it just sits in my bag and I simply forget to use it. And it's like, that kills me, because there are just a few little things you could do to force yourself to remember it. One is just being really context aware of where a prism is really useful, or any tool for that matter. Like, most tools aren't going to be applicable in all situations. There are really certain circumstances where it's going to shine. With the prism, tends to be when you have a subject that's lit, like a person like lit up pretty well, and then a lot of dark, kind of dark shadowy or just negative like black space filling the frame. That space is prime real estate to throw in a prism and fill with a reflection, compared to having just a blanket kind of evenly lit scene where, yeah, you could throw in something and it'll create a reflection, but that doesn't have that pop and intensity. But it took me a while to realize that, like, oh, okay, yeah, since this is silhouette or there's a lot of dark negative space, that signals to me, like, remember to use the prism, try the prism. But, it takes practice to develop that muscle memory. And so, like any tool with the Ring of Fire, same thing. Like, it took me forever to even realize that you could get a look at all, but that look was completely dependent on having a small, harsh light source coming right down the barrel. So you need the sun at around sunset for this to work. Shooting indoors in broad light or with beautiful big window lights, like, it's not going to do anything. So now every time I see small harsh light sources indoors with like a flashlight or street light, or at nighttime with car lights or street lights, or at sunset, I immediately know, just in the back of my head, oh, this is prime real estate. I may or may not use it, but this is prime time for the Ring of Fire. So it just takes practice to kind of get there. But anyway, I've been grateful for a pretty consistent evolution in stuff that I use that kind of breaks me out of my normal routine, but certainly been guilty of some things. Now, I would say more recently, I have started to pay a lot more attention, not just to the lighting, but to the color of things, like what people are wearing or where they are in the frame relative to the color. I've become much, much better at gravitating in the real physical world during a shoot towards things that, if the light is really good, that's always primary importance, number one. 100%. Compositionally, sometimes I'm putting the color before what I'm figuring out compositionally, where it's a complementary color to what they're wearing or some playfulness in it. Yeah, I've become much more aware that it's top of mind. It's not like an intuitive thing anymore. I'm intentionally using colors in a way that I hadn't before. So, which is kind of tough because a lot of wedding couples, they don't deviate much in the color scheme. It's white dress and then tends to be a darker suit of some kind, or if you get lucky,
with like your single color that's always going to be either coral or mint green. Or blue, right? So like there are your three colors that someone's gonna, all the colors in the world, but also it's going to be coral or mint green or blue, right? Like there's just
I'm thinking about dropping the prices on my engagement sessions so I can do a bit more of them. Because when I raised my prices on them, like clearly it had an impact, and not as many people book them and include them in their package. But that really is such a prime time to play around, not just having more time with them without the pressure of the wedding day to experiment and kind of hone your skills that you can then bring with you more efficiently on the wedding day. But people do tend to wear much more playful kind of everyday colors like what you and I have on right now. It wouldn't be that uncommon during an engagement session compared to, again, the mint green and navy blue or whatever suits and
it's like,
white wedding dresses.
I love aspects of living in a Pinterest world, but I really hate homogenized design decisions. It's a huge bummer. Speaking of tools that get you out of a creative rut or inspire you, sign up today at insight.photo and glass.photo for the community that you need and the little computers to tell you new ideas on how to set a hand. That really did a poor job of selling the thing. It just felt like a nice time for a sponsor. So I was actually I didn't want to do it, but I'm gonna do it. So an exciting development, as Sam was testing for Insight, he has had to purchase and then do the B&H return, and now got a hookup from Nikon with a Z8. Sam came over for dinner. He brought it. I tried it, and I have a problem. I have a very dumb...
In that you want it.
No, well, so I do, but I hated...
Oh, yes, right.
I hated a very dumb thing about it. This is not a reason to not use a photographer, a photo. This is not a, like... Okay. But it is. This should not be a deal breaker, and I don't think it is, but it is a thing that if I purchase this camera and use repeatedly, I will still be mad at. The Z8 and the Z9 are the first major mirrorless cameras from a major person that does not have a mechanical shutter available at all. It is only electronic. Because of that, they have a fake click noise, and it is the worst noise I've heard in my life.
without the ability to customize it so far. As far as I've read, they're working on a firmware update on the Z9 to give you a larger range of what to choose, but it's kind of mind-blowing that there's no ability to just import your own little MP3 snippet or something. And
it is a terrible sound. It is the sad, like, I don't know where it is in your house, if you have it next to you, or if you want to, go grab it while I just rant about how terrible this noise is, so you can get the audio of it.
Sure.
Don't trip down the stairs or anything. But it was just
be right back.
To set the stage while Sam goes to get this camera so he can click it next to the microphone for you. I was very excited. Like Sam, having the ability to borrow this briefly from Sam while he is using it for testing was wonderful, and I was very excited. I was, dreading purchasing this camera because while I do feel I need a mirrorless, I didn't really want to do it this season. And I was worried that using it would like push me over the edge and immediately make me want to have it. And then I held it, and it felt great, and it focused amazing. And then I clicked the button, and it sounded like a tin can had met a camera at some point, and then through a game of telephone instead tripped over itself. I don't know. It was like just the most uninspiring little noise, which is fine. You can turn that off. That's great. But because of a different feature where they improved the live view so much, it will now not give you any signal that you took the photo if you turn off the noise. There's no black screen flash. There's nothing, which historically has been a large complaint for photographers. They really want that screen to stay live. Now it does, but because the noise was so mediocre, Sam might have turned it off so much that it could never be turned on again. But the noise was so bad.
Yeah, okay. I missed some of that, but I am back here with the Z8. It is in full silent mode right now, so it's going to take me a second to find the option. But I will say, even in full silent mode, I do not like how they've chosen to signal to you that the photo is being taken. It's like 4 little white dashes in the center-ish part of each corner or side, and on Canon, it's a full white box. But which is a little bit better, but what would be nice is if you could have the option to have it black out the screen. So you really know, unless you're shooting at the insanely high frame rate mode. But if you're one shot at a time, or maybe fewer than 9 frames per second, you really know when each shot is firing instead of having to get this slight dash of an outline. It's kind of weird.
Well, yeah, I didn't expect that to turn me off immediately to purchasing the camera in general. But I was immediately like, I don't want this thing anymore.
Oh, no.
But I don't, it's not that I want any of them. I would prefer not to purchase one at all this year. I would like to wait until next season. But, man.
I am having a lot of issues figuring out where the heck.
I love this for you.
I found where to turn the silent mode on and off, but I can't find where to change the freaking volume, and because I turned silent mode off and I still don't hear anything. So I think the volume is.
You made it so low because it was such a bad sound that we never wanted to hear it again.
Yeah, camera sounds. Here we go. So
all right, this is just gonna be the end of the episode. I appreciate you, Sam. Listen to this terrible noise, and we're out. Come on. Oh my God.
Yeah. That's the loudest volume here. That's high pitch. Here's low pitch.
Oh, it can get worse.
Which sounds like exactly the same.
You're going to see the waveforms.
It just seems like a crappy little toy camera sound that you've given a toddler with their first camera. It's like, yeah. Let's hear it. Maybe it's more exciting in burst mode. Okay, let's go.
Oh, that's less bad. But it's not great.
It's not great. It sounds like a video game.
That's definitely a sound effect from GoldenEye Nintendo 64 gun. It's just
Yeah, sad times. Not a great vibe.
shutter noise. And then I don't know, and like that shouldn't be a deal breaker. It's probably not going to be a deal breaker. I'm still, probably going to end up with it. But
Yeah, they would have done. I think they should have put in some sort of tactile response, like a little, like what's in cell phones, to
give me a haptic
so you
engine.
can feel.
Give me a little.
Yeah, a little haptic engine would be wonderful. It's odd to me that they didn't think to do that. There is a shutter curtain even in this. It sounds pretty good when you turn the camera off.
Yeah, so that's the.
It's nice. All right.
Anyway, I appreciate you. Thank you for
Appreciate
sharing
you too.
that pain with me. If you use Lightroom on your phone, send me an email. I really want to hear from you because I want to ask why.
Sounds good. All right. We'll end it there.
1,